My phone vibrated against the particle board nightstand, a harsh buzzing noise that dragged me from the depths of a dead sleep. The red numbers on the hotel clock glared at me, 1:47 a.m. Outside, the lights of Dallas filtered through the thin, cheap curtains. I was supposed to be testifying in a deposition in 8 hours. I fumbled for the cell, squinting against the harsh blue-white glow. A text message. Not a call, which meant it wasn't an emergency. Or so I thought. It was from my mother, Meredith. "Finally took care of that empty house of yours. You're welcome." I blinked, the words swimming in my sleep-fogged brain. Empty house? What was she talking about? My apartment was in Arlington. My parents lived in Lexington, the only other property I owned. My thumb swiped open the message thread, my heart suddenly beating a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. A cascade of follow-up texts appeared, all sent within the last 5 minutes. "If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you." The realtor found us a cash buyer. Can you believe it? $1.25 million. I sat bolt upright, the hotel sheets pooling around my waist. The room felt suddenly intensely cold. Another message popped up. "We used that old power of attorney you signed before your deployment. The one from the military, remember? Don't worry, we signed everything. All legal." My body went rigid. The power of attorney. The document I'd signed 8 years ago, before shipping out. A document meant for medical emergencies or financial holds during my deployment. The one I had, in the chaos of returning and joining the Marshal service, completely forgotten to revoke. My hand was trembling. I tried to dial her number, but my thumb kept slipping on the screen. Before I could connect, a new text lit up the phone. It was a picture. My younger sister, Rebecca, beaming and holding up a glass of champagne. She was standing in an opulent, gold-leafed ballroom. The text underneath was from Meredith again. "Rebecca's wedding venue deposit is secured." She's ecstatic. The caterer, the band, the Plaza Hotel ballroom, everything top shelf. Our baby deserves the best. A cold wave washed over me, so intense it made me gasp. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying, sickening clarity. The house in Brookhaven. My house. The house I'd purchased under my own name as a sterile asset for the U.S. Marshal Service. The house that was, at this very moment, supposed to be a federal safe house. The house where the Escobar family was living under round-the-clock protection. Catalina Escobar, a federal witness, the woman whose testimony was the only thing standing between the Rivas cartel and the entire East Coast drug trade. Her 2 sons, Mateo, 14, and Andres, 10. My parents, in their quest to fund my sister's dream wedding, hadn't just sold my house. They had sold a federal safe house. They had sold out 3 innocent lives. My fingers finally worked. I hit dial, praying this was some terrible, elaborate misunderstanding, that they'd sold a different house, that I was still asleep. She answered on the first ring, her voice chipper and bright, completely oblivious to the hour. "Vanessa. Isn't it wonderful news? We've been trying to reach you for days. That old place was just sitting there." "Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I cleared my throat, forcing steel into it. "What? Exactly. Did you do? We sold your house in Brookhaven, that place you never visit, the one just sitting there empty? Tom, pick up the extension. Vanessa's on the line." I heard my father, Thomas, grunt in the background. A moment later, his voice, gruff with sleep, joined the call. "Van, that you?" "What's going on?" The house wasn't empty, I managed to say through clenched teeth. My mother laughed, a light, airy sound that made my stomach turn. "Don't be silly. We drove by twice last month. Not a single light on, newspapers piled up on the curb. The realtor did a walkthrough. Nobody lives there." "Of course not," I whispered, closing my eyes. "It's called operational security, blackout curtains, mail collection protocols. No visible signs of habitation." "You had no right," I said, my voice rising. We had every right, my father countered, his tone instantly defensive. That old, familiar tone he always used when I questioned him. That power of attorney is still valid. We checked. Rebecca's fiancé's cousin practices real estate law. A crushing weight settled on my chest. Who? I demanded. Who bought it? A company called Galleria Real Estate Group, Mom chirped. All cash. Can you believe our luck? Settlement was yesterday. Rebecca's already put the deposits on the plaza. Galleria. The name meant nothing and everything. Ice formed in my veins. Cash buyers don't ask questions. Cash buyers who use anonymous LLCs pay premium prices, or in this case, a lowball price for a quick, quiet sale, for very specific reasons. They buy assets, not homes. Vanessa, my father's voice dropped into that familiar, condescending lecture, the one he'd used my entire life to explain why Rebecca's ballet recitals trumped my track meets. Sometimes family comes first. Your sister needs this. That house was just an asset you were ignoring. It wasn't an asset, I said flatly. It was a promise. But we need to discuss the funds. We need to... I ended the call. My fingers were already dialing the direct line for Deputy Director Jonas Hawes. It was 2:05 a.m. in D.C. He wouldn't care. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick with sleep but instantly alert. Hawes. Sir, this is Croft. My voice was shaking. I took a breath. Sir, my parents just sold the Rivas safe house. The silence on the other end was absolute. It stretched for 3 long, terrible heartbeats. Then his voice transformed. The sleep vanished, replaced by cold, hard granite. Say that again, Deputy. My parents. They found an old military power of attorney I never revoked. They sold my Brookhaven house to a cash buyer. Settlement completed yesterday. Jesus Christ. I heard the rustling of sheets, the sharp click of a bedside lamp. Who's the buyer? Galleria Real Estate Group, LLC. His sharp intake of breath told me everything. He'd reached the same conclusion I had, only faster. It's them, he said. It's a known Rivas shell company. We've been tracking their acquisitions for 6 months. My throat constricted. Valentin Rivas Jr., the man whose father Catalina Escobar was testifying against, the man who favored piano wire and bolt cutters. He wasn't just looking for the witnesses, Croft, Hawes said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He was looking for you. He found you, and you led him right to them. Get on the next flight to D.C., Hawes commanded. Wheels up in 2 hours, or I'll have the FAA ground a passenger jet and put you in the cockpit. Sir, I'm activating a Tier 1 relocation. Right now. I'm calling in the team. The Escobars are blown, completely and totally compromised. I'm on my way, I said, my voice numb. Croft. His voice stopped me. This is not a discussion. If Rivas's people made the connection between you and that house, and they just paid $1.25 million so they are already moving. You get here, now. He hung up. I threw my suitcase onto the bed and started shoving clothes inside, my mind racing through emergency protocols. My phone felt like a brick in my hand, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. What have they done? The answer came in the form of a new text from my mother, a cheerful, bubbly message explaining that they had arranged a surprise engagement brunch for Rebecca and Ethan this Sunday. I stared at the message, a cold, hard knot forming in my gut. By morning, Rebecca's wedding dreams were going to be the absolute least of our family's problems. 6 hours later, I was in a Justice Department conference room that smelled of burnt coffee and pure dread. My carry-on suitcase stood in the corner, a silent testament to my hasty retreat from Dallas. I sat at the long, polished table, surrounded by the grim-faced senior leadership of the Witness Security Program. Let's review what we know, Deputy Director Jonas Hawes said. He wore no tie, and his shirt was rumpled. He'd clearly been up all night assembling this emergency response. His thumb tapped a rhythm of pure anger against a manila folder. "The sale closed yesterday at 11:37 a.m., said Eleanor Price, senior counsel for the DOJ. She adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses, her eyes scanning the report. "Sold for $125 million to Galleria Real Estate Group, LLC. "Market value of that property is $3.2 million, Hawes cut in, his voice tight. "Nobody pays that far under market in a cash deal unless they're buying something other than the house." "The LLC was registered in Delaware 3 weeks ago," Price continued, her voice holding the flat, controlled tone of someone who had seen disaster before. "We've traced its funding to 2 shell companies in Nassau." My stomach clenched. "It's Rivas." "Almost certainly," Price said, her eyes meeting mine. "It's cartel-linked. The money trail is sloppy. They were moving too fast. They didn't think we'd be looking." "They weren't sloppy," I said, my voice quiet. "They were arrogant. They knew we wouldn't be looking because the property was clean. It was in my name, a U.S. Marshal." Hawes slid a document across the table. It was a copy of the power of attorney. My signature, 8 years old, stared up at me. "Your father presented this to the title company," Hawes said. "They verified it against military records. It was technically still valid." "It was for my deployment," I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "For medical decisions. I never revoked it." "Your father," Hawes continued, his tone dangerously neutral, "listed your mother as the realtor of record." I looked up, confused. "What?" "Meredith Croft was the selling agent," Price clarified, tapping her pen. "The title company cut her a check directly from the proceeds, 5% commission, $62,500, on top of the $1.25 million wired to your parents' account." The number burned into my brain. $62,500, a bonus, for selling out a federal witness. "For my sister's wedding," I whispered. Hawes slammed the folder shut. "The Escobars are being moved as we speak. Tactical teams are bringing them to a secure staging area. You're going to meet them there." "Sir?" Fear, cold and sharp, snaked around my ribs. "Sir, I don't think—" "They deserve to know why their lives are being uprooted again, Croft," Hawes said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "They deserve to hear it from someone who will look them in the eye when she tells them." 4 hours later, I stood in the reinforced concrete basement of the federal building, watching Catalina Escobar's face drain of all color. Her boys, Mateo, 14, and Andres, 10, huddled against her sides. The tactical team had rushed them from my house with only the clothes on their backs and 1 backpack each. Your family?" Catalina whispered, her fingers digging into her son's shoulders. The trust we had built over 6 months of protection, of late-night reassurances and shared anxieties, was crumbling to dust right in front of me. "They found us because of your family?" I swallowed against the acid in my throat. "My parents—" "Yes. They didn't know what the house was. They thought it was empty." Her dark eyes narrowed. "You swore we would be safe here. You swore it, Veronica." "You are safe," I said, gesturing to the underground facility, the armed marshals at every door. "We got you out in time. Rivas's people haven't found you." "Mama!" Mateo interrupted, his adolescent voice cracking. "Will they find us again? Will they?" Before Catalina could answer, the heavy steel door opened. Marshal Dominic Russo entered, his tactical vest still strapped to his chest. The man had been running operations for 18 hours straight, but his alertness never wavered. He was the best tactical lead we had. "Extraction teams ready when you are," he said, nodding respectfully to Catalina. "Transport to Quincy Air Base leaves in 10. "Quincy?" Catalina's eyes widened. "The Marine base?" "Temporary holding," I explained, desperate to rebuild her confidence. "It's a skiff. Nobody gets in or out without the highest clearance. We'll establish a new identity package from there." Eleanor Price strode in, tapping furiously on her tablet. Money trails are coming together, she said, not looking up. The same Nassau account that funded Galleria made 3 payments to private investigators in the D.C. area over the past month. All 3 specialize in digital surveillance and asset tracking. They were already looking, Russo muttered, his eyes on me. They were digging into you. And my parents gave them the golden ticket, I said. The words tasted bitter. Catalina clutched Andres closer as the boy buried his face in her shirt. Valentin Rivas Jr. doesn't stop hunting, she whispered, her voice trembling. Not until he finds what he wants. Mrs. Escobar, Hawes stepped forward, his voice commanding attention. Rivas Jr. doesn't know where you are now, and he never will. Andres peeked out from his mother's embrace. Promise? The question hung in the air, a child's simple request for a security that none of us in that moment could absolutely guarantee. I promise, Hawes answered, his voice softening, that we will do everything in our power. It was the closest to honesty he could offer. 3 hours later, I watched from the federal building's roof as the armored convoy departed for Quincy. 6 identical black SUVs, only one containing the Escobar family. The others carried decoy teams, all following different pre-planned routes to the Marine base, 30 miles south. They'll be secure tonight, Eleanor Price said, joining me at the railing. The wind whipped her hair across her face. For tonight, I said, unable to tear my eyes from the disappearing taillights. The money trail team needs your parents' banking information, she said. Every transaction for the past 6 months. We need to see where that $1.25 million went. You'll have it. You should know, she hesitated. I've filed emergency motions to freeze the proceeds from the sale. All of it. I nodded. Good. Including any funds already dispersed, like, for instance, deposits for a wedding at the Plaza Hotel. The legal consequences for my parents, I said, my voice hollow, will be what they deserve, I finished, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Eleanor studied me for a long moment. The question she asked wasn't hypothetical. It was an assessment of my loyalty. What would you do, Croft, if your family's actions put innocent lives at risk? I turned to face her fully. I'd make sure justice was served, no matter who it hurt. My phone buzzed. Hawes. Croft. Sir, we've got a problem. What is it? I asked, my blood running cold. Did they hit the convoy? No, Hawes said. The convoy is black, but we just got a digital tip, an anonymous drop into our main server. Eleanor is looking at it now. Price, still next to me, was already on her own phone. I see it, sir. It's high-confidence encryption. Looks like an internal source. What does it say? I demanded. The source claims Rivas has an asset inside the wire. Hawes's voice was grim. A mole. Where? Russo's voice joined the call. He was in the command vehicle, monitoring the convoy. Where is the mole? Not Quincy, Price said, her face pale in the rooftop lights. The tip says the asset is at Andrews Air Force Base. Andrews? I said, that makes no sense. The asset is at Quincy. That's the destination. Is it? Hawes countered. Or is Rivas playing a different game? The tip is specific. It names a civilian logistics coordinator at Andrews, says he's been on Rivas's payroll for a year. It could be a trap, I said, my mind racing, a diversion. Or it could be the real threat, Hawes shot back. Rivas knows we're moving them. What if Quincy is the feint? What if the real transport plane is waiting at Andrews? We can't risk it. Russo, your convoy proceeds to Quincy, full lockdown. Croft, Price, you're with me. We're going to Andrews, now. For the next 4 hours, we tore Andrews Air Force Base apart. We hit the logistics coordinator's office with a full tactical and cyber team. We pulled him out of his bed. We mirrored his hard drives, scanned his bank records, and ripped his office apart. We found nothing. The man was clean. A 20-year employee with a perfect record and a mild gambling habit, but nothing linking him to Nassau or Galleria. I stood in a sterile server room at 4 a.m., watching a cyber agent shake his head. Nothing, Deputy Director. No pings, no hidden files, no contact. This guy's biggest crime is betting on the ponies. It's thin, I said to Hawes. It's all too thin. This feels wrong. Hawes rubbed his eyes, his face a mask of exhaustion and fury. It was too specific. It had to be... His radio crackled to life. It was Russo. Deputy Director, this is Russo at Quincy. His voice was tense. Perimeter control just picked up a visual. 2 men, long lenses, half a mile out from our main gate, concealed in the tree line. A heavy, sickening silence filled the server room. Hawes closed his eyes. They're not trying to get in. No, sir, Russo said. They're confirming. They're watching the decoy convoy arrive. They're confirming the Escobars are here. It was a diversion, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Rivas played us, Hawes said, his voice pure granite. He knew we'd overreact to an internal threat. He sent us on a wild goose chase to Andrews, just to buy his spotters enough time to get set up at Quincy. He wasn't trying to guess where we were going. He told us where to look, and we fell for it. He fed us the Andrews intel. He turned to me, his eyes blazing. He didn't just find them, Croft. He's toying with us. He made us look like fools. I slammed my hand against the server rack. The metal vibrated with the force of the impact. They were compromised. Quincy was compromised. All because of a text message about a wedding. They're moving again, Hawes said into his radio. Russo, get them to the secondary hold. Sub-level 4. No one moves, no one breathes. We are dark. He turned to me. This all started with your family. I need to know what they know, and I need to know who they talk to. My mother? She mentioned a name, I said, the memory cutting through the fog of my anger. Someone from her Rotary Club. Miranda Bishop. She's the one who introduced them to the realtor. Go, Hawes ordered. Get to your parents' house in Lexington. Find out everything about this Miranda Bishop. Take 2 agents. I'll meet you there as soon as I've locked down Quincy. The drive to Lexington was silent. The 2 agents in the car with me said nothing. They didn't have to. The fury rolling off me was a palpable thing. Rivas hadn't just beaten us. He'd used my own family to do it, and then he'd rubbed our faces in it. This wasn't just a breach, it was an insult, and I was going to make them pay for it. We arrived in Lexington in the late afternoon. The scene in my parents' backyard was so achingly, sickeningly normal, it made my stomach clench. Red-checkered tablecloths fluttered in the breeze. Relatives clustered around picnic tables, laughing. The smell of charcoal and my father's famous ribs hung in the air. I hung back by the garage with the 2 agents watching my sister Rebecca hold court by the rose trellis. Her diamond engagement ring, bought and paid for with cartel blood money, caught the sunlight as she flipped through photos on a tablet. The Plaza Hotel ballroom books up years in advance, she announced, her voice carrying across the lawn. But they had a cancellation. We just got so lucky. Lucky. The word stuck in my throat like a fishbone. Deputy Director Hawes's government-issue SUV pulled into the driveway, ticking as it cooled. He got out, his face a mask of grim professionalism. You ready for this, Croft? No, I answered honestly, but necessary things rarely wait for ready. We moved across the lawn together. The laughter and conversation died in ripples as heads turned. My cousin's plastic cup froze halfway to her mouth. My uncle's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Rebecca spotted us last. Her brilliant smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure confusion when she registered my expression and the 3 grim-faced strangers flanking me. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. Vanessa, you made it after all. We were so worried when you didn't... Her voice trailed off as she took in Hawes's expression. Who are your friends, dear? Hawes stepped forward, his badge already extended. Deputy Director Jonas Hawes, U.S. Marshal Service. "Ma'am, we need to discuss the Brookhaven property." My father appeared from behind the grill, a beer in one hand, a spatula in the other. "What's this about, Van? You look terrible." The yard had gone cemetery quiet. "That house," I said, keeping my voice level despite the fury churning inside me. It wasn't just mine. It was a federal safe house. It was protecting witnesses in an active cartel investigation. My father's beer slipped from his fingers. The bottle shattered on the patio stones, foam and glass spraying across his deck shoes. That's impossible," my mother sputtered, her hand flying to her throat. "We didn't know. Vanessa, we didn't know." "Clearly," Hawes cut in, his voice sharp as glass. "Otherwise, you wouldn't have sold federal property to a cash buyer you'd never met. Who connected you?" Rebecca pushed through the circle of silent relatives. "What does this have to do with us? The house was empty. You're just jealous, Vanessa. You're jealous of my wedding." "It wasn't empty," I said, locking eyes with her. "The witnesses were temporarily relocated for a court appearance. They were scheduled to return tomorrow." "This must be a misunderstanding," my father insisted, his face flushing a deep crimson. "The realtor assured us." "Which realtor?" Hawes demanded. "Who was it?" "A woman. A woman introduced to me by Miranda Bishop," my mother stammered. "From my Rotary Club. I mentioned Vanessa's empty house in Brookhaven, and she said she knew a cash buyer." "You talked about my house at Rotary Club?" The betrayal sliced deeper than I thought possible. "A house you knew I never ever discussed?" "You never visited it," Rebecca snapped. "It was just sitting there, empty, while I've been scrambling for wedding funds for months." "You used an expired military power of attorney to sell property that wasn't yours to sell," I said, my voice cold. "We had every right," my father shot back, finding his footing. "That lawyer said—" "Which lawyer?" Hawes demanded. "Rebecca's fiancé's cousin," my mother said, her certainty wavering. He practices real estate law in Pittsburgh." Rebecca stepped forward, tears of rage and self-pity welling in her eyes. "You're ruining my wedding. You're ruining everything over your stupid secret job. We have $380,000 in non-refundable BOW deposits. The dress alone cost—" "Rebecca," I interrupted, my voice flat. "3 people's lives were endangered. Children." "We didn't know," my mother wailed. Hawes cleared his throat, silencing the yard. "Mrs. Croft, our investigation has revealed that Galleria Real Estate Group, LLC, the company that purchased the property, is a shell corporation." He paused, letting the weight of his next words land. "It is owned by Valentin Rivas, Jr." The name fell like a grenade into the middle of the barbecue. Even Rebecca went silent. "Victor Rivas?" my father repeated slowly. "As in the Rivas cartel family from the news?" "The very same," Hawes confirmed. "Agent Torres, would you show them the warrant?" One of the agents stepped forward with an official document. "This is a federal seizure order for all proceeds from the illegal sale of the Brookhaven property. That includes the $1.25 million and any funds already dispersed or spent from that account." Rebecca's face drained of all color. "But my deposits. My wedding." "Federal funds from a cartel asset seizure take precedence over wedding cakes, ma'am," Hawes said, his voice devoid of sympathy. A car door slammed. Rebecca's fiancé, Ethan, strode across the lawn, his golf polo pristine. "What's going on? Rebecca, you texted something about the feds and money." Agent Torres handed him a copy of the warrant. He scanned it, his jaw tightening. "Is this for real?" he asked, looking from Rebecca to my parents, then to me. "You're telling me the wedding money. It came from selling a house to drug dealers?" "Ethan, baby, we can explain," Rebecca began, reaching for him. "No thanks." He tossed the papers onto the picnic table, right into a bowl of potato salad. "I'm not starting my life with cartel money and a federal investigation. My family are judges. I'm not doing this." He turned and walked back to his BMW without a backward glance. "Ethan!" Rebecca shrieked, chasing after him across the lawn. "Ethan, you can't just leave." He got in his car and drove away. My father sank onto a bench, suddenly looking every day of his 64 years. "This isn't just about the money, is it?" he asked quietly. "No, Mr. Croft," Hawes answered. "Witness protection breaches carry criminal penalties. We're just getting started." Later that night, the party was long over. My parents were inside, their frantic calls to lawyers echoing through the open windows. Hawes was coordinating with D.C. I was in the driveway with Marshal Russo, who had just arrived from Quincy. "Hawes wants us to run down the Miranda Bishop lead," I said, rubbing my temples. "My thoughts exactly," Russo said. "Your mother gave up her name too easily." "She thinks she's a witness, not a suspect," I said. "Let's go." We found Miranda Bishop's real estate office in a strip mall in the next town over. It was dark. "Closed for the day," Russo said. "Or closed for good." I pulled my lockpick set from my go bag. "This is my family's mess. I'm not waiting for a warrant." 2 minutes later, we were inside. The office was small, dusty, and almost completely empty. No computers, no files, just a desk and a phone. "Wiped clean," Russo muttered, shining his flashlight around. She knew we were coming. "People like this are always greedy," I said, scanning the room. I tapped the wall behind the desk. Nothing. I checked the cheap laminate flooring. Under the desk, one of the boards felt loose. I jammed my pry bar into the seam and lifted. Underneath, nestled in the subfloor, was a black laptop. I pulled it out and flipped it open. It was password protected. "Get this to cyber," Russo said. "No time." I pulled a drive from my bag. I can bypass the local login. A few minutes later, I was on the desktop. It was clean except for one folder labeled Taxes. Inside were scanned bank statements. I opened the most recent one. My eyes scanned the deposits. "There," I said, pointing. Russo leaned in. A wire transfer from 3 days ago. From Galleria Real Estate Group, LLC to Miranda Bishop, amount $50,000. Memo, finder's fee, Brookhaven. "We got her," Russo breathed. "This is the conspiracy. This proves she was a paid associate, not just a friend from Rotary. This proves my mother's realtor was a cartel scout," I said, saving a copy of the file to my secure drive. "This connects my parents' sale directly to Rivas." I snapped the laptop shut. "Let's go." We exited the office into the dark, empty parking garage under the building. The air was damp and smelled of old oil. "This feels too easy," Russo said, his hand straying to his hip. "It was," I said, clutching the laptop. A set of headlights flashed on at the far end of the garage. A black sedan, engine off until that moment, roared to life. It squealed around the corner, tires smoking, and sped directly toward us, blocking the only exit. 2 doors flew open. 2 men in dark hoodies jumped out, guns already raised. "Marshals, drop it!" Russo yelled, shoving me behind a concrete pillar as the first shots echoed like cannons in the enclosed space. Sparks and concrete chips exploded from the pillar next to my head. Russo returned fire, 2 quick, controlled shots that shattered the sedan's windshield. "Drop the laptop, Marshal!" one of the men shouted, his voice muffled. He wasn't aiming at us. He was aiming at the laptop in my hand. I raised my own weapon, trying to get a clear shot. The second man fired. I didn't feel the impact, but I heard it. A sharp crack and thwack. The laptop was ripped from my grasp, shattering against the pillar. The screen exploded in a shower of plastic and glass. The chassis, smoking, clattered to the ground. A 9mm hole punched clean through the hard drive. "Go! Go! Go!" the men yelled. They jumped back in the sedan, threw it in reverse, and sped out of the garage's entrance, disappearing into the night. Russo ran out, firing 2 more rounds at the disappearing taillights. He cursed, long and low, clutching his arm. A long graze was bleeding through his sleeve. I just stared at the smoking wreck of the laptop. The evidence, the only evidence connecting Miranda Bishop to Rivas, gone. They weren't trying to kill us, Russo said, breathing hard as he pressed a hand to his wound. They were destroying the evidence. They knew we'd find it, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. They left the laptop for us to find, and they had a cleanup crew waiting. I kicked the destroyed machine. Rivas is still toying with us. My phone rang. It was Hawes. I told him what happened. "Damn it," he yelled over the line. "Without that, we can't prove your mother was a witting conspirator. We can't prove she knew Bishop was cartel. The case against her just got a lot weaker. It's just hearsay now." I looked at the blood on Russo's arm. I thought of the spotters at Quincy. I thought of the $50,000 finder's fee. "Then we'll get them on something else," I said, my voice pure ice. "Something they can't destroy." "Like what, Croft? They're already lawyered up." "Like the power of attorney," I said. "That document wasn't just old, it was specific. I know exactly what I signed, and I know my father initialed the restrictions page. He knew exactly what its limits were, and he ignored them." Before Hawes could respond, my tactical radio crackled. It was the Quincy base commander. "Deputy, we have a situation. Our perimeter drones have spotted new movement. 3 vehicles blacked out on the service road. They're not just spotting, they're probing." Russo and I looked at each other. "They're accelerating," he said. "They know we're on to them," I said. I switched back to Hawes. "Sir, I have to go. They're moving at Quincy. I'm pulling the Escobars out tonight. We're going to the secondary airfield." "Go," Hawes said. "I'll handle the agents at your parents' house. This mess just went from a breach to a manhunt." I hung up and turned to Russo. "Get that arm patched. I'm driving." As we peeled out of the garage, my phone lit up with a call from my mother. I ignored it. She called again and again. Finally, a text. "Vanessa, please, your sister needs you. You're destroying this family." I looked at Russo, who was tying a makeshift bandage around his arm. I thought of Catalina and Matteo and Andres, huddled in a concrete bunker. I threw my phone into the back seat and hit the gas. We were a ghost convoy. 3 black SUVs with federal plates, no sirens, no flashers. We slid through the midnight streets, headlights cutting ribbons through a fog that hung low over the highway, like funeral shrouds. I checked my watch, 3:17 a.m. We'd been moving for 20 minutes, taking a randomized, pre-planned route to the secure airfield. I was driving the lead vehicle. Russo was in the passenger seat, his arm bandaged, a rifle across his lap. In the back seat, Catalina Escobar clutched her younger son, Andres, to her chest. His 10-year-old body was curled against her like a question mark. 14-year-old Matteo stared out the side window, his jaw muscle twitching. His eyes reflected the passing streetlights, flashes of gold in the darkness. "How much longer?" Catalina whispered, her accent thickening with exhaustion. "Another 40 minutes to the airfield," I answered, keeping my voice low. "Then a direct flight to the new location, a place Rivas has never even heard of." Matteo turned from the window. "Will they find us again?" His voice cracked, betraying the man-child facade he'd been maintaining. Beneath the teenage stoicism was a terrified boy who had already seen his father executed. The question hung in the car. I could offer platitudes. I could give him the empty, procedural reassurances. But after what my family had done, this family deserved better than comfortable lies. I met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "Not while I'm alive." The promise settled in the air around us, heavy and solid as armor. At the airfield, Russo oversaw the loading procedures, his massive frame silhouetted against the harsh floodlights. His tactical team formed a protective circle around the Escobars, weapons visible, eyes scanning the shadows beyond the tarmac. "All clear," Russo confirmed, his voice gravel from too many cigarettes and too little sleep. "Plane's ready." "Pilot reports clear weather all the way." I nodded, my throat tight. as Catalina led her boys up the stairs to the small, unmarked government jet. They carried nothing but the backpacks they'd been allowed to pack. Everything else, their toys, their clothes, their lives, stayed behind. Too dangerous to transport, too easily traced. "Someone from the press office sent this," Russo said, holding out a tablet. "Thought you should see it before takeoff." The screen showed a local DC news website. The headline made my stomach drop. "Major breach in witness security program threatens cartel prosecution." I scrolled down and saw a video clip of my mother. She was standing on the porch of our Lexington home, microphones thrust in her face. She was sobbing, perfectly made up even in her distress. "We had no idea," she cried to the cameras. "How were we supposed to know? We thought the house was empty. It was just an empty house. My daughter, she never tells us anything." The camera cut to a stern-faced Justice Department spokesperson on the courthouse steps. I spotted myself in the background, standing expressionless beside Hawes as reporters shouted questions we couldn't answer. I handed the tablet back to Russo, nausea rising in my throat. "That's not even the worst of it," he said, his face grim. He pulled up another screen, Rebecca's Instagram. It had been posted 43 minutes ago. It was a selfie of her, tears streaming down her face. The caption read, "When your sister's secret job ruins your entire wedding, bankrupts your parents, and destroys your life. Thanks for nothing, A.V. Croft. We're family betrayal. We're a worst sister ever. We're a Plaza Hotel. We're canceled." It already had over 2,000 sympathetic comments. "Family, huh?" Russo said with surprising gentleness for a man who specialized in tactical demolitions. "Tough break, Croft." I swallowed, my throat raw. They made their choice. I boarded the plane. Inside, Andres and Mateo had already fallen asleep, their heads tilted against each other, exhausted by the terror. Catalina watched me enter, her dark eyes knowing. She had spent 2 years in our protection after testifying against the men who murdered her husband. She recognized the weight of impossible choices. "Your family," she said softly, not as a question, but as a statement. "This must be hard." I sank into the seat across from her. "They're alive," I said. "They're safe in their beds. Unlike what would have happened to you and your boys if we hadn't moved you." She nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. The Rivas organization didn't leave witnesses. Valentin Jr. was known for it. "In my country," Catalina said, her voice quiet but firm, "we have a saying, sangre te hace pariente, lealtad te hace familia." She saw my confusion. "Blood makes you related," she translated. "Loyalty makes you family." She reached across the narrow aisle and squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You have shown loyalty, Veronica. To us. That is all that matters." The plane's engines rumbled to life. My phone buzzed. It was Hawes. "They're in the air?" "Wheels up in 5, sir," I said, pressing my forehead against the cool glass of the window. "Good," he said. "Porter's built the case. DOJ is moving forward with charges against your parents." My breath hitched. "What charges?" 6 counts. Conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of justice, reckless endangerment, and 3 counts of endangering a federal witness, 1 for Catalina, 1 for each of the boys. I closed my eyes. And the money? Porter is arguing that the $50,000 finder's fee to Miranda Bishop proves conspiracy. Bishop's already on a plane to Nassau, but it's enough to link the sale to Rivas's organization. Your parents didn't just sell a house, Croft. They laundered money for a cartel. The betrayal deepened, twisting like a knife. That $50,000, the evidence Rivas's men had destroyed. But Porter was using the transfer itself, even without the laptop. "We've got round-the-clock security at the courthouse," Hawes continued. "Catalina testifies next Tuesday, as planned." "I'll be there," I said. "One more thing, your sister. She's going public again tomorrow, morning shows. She's painting herself as the victim in all this." A bitter, dry laugh escaped me. "Of course she is." The plane taxied toward the runway. Beside me, Catalina straightened her son's blanket with the automatic, gentle tenderness of motherhood, her hands steady despite the steel in her spine. 3 lives preserved. No thanks to my family. You should know, Hawes said, his voice softening for the first time. Every marshal in the D.C. division has requested assignment to this case. Transport, courthouse security. They're calling you their betrayed sister. Family takes different forms, Croft, remember that. He hung up. As the plane lifted into the darkness, my phone displayed one final message. It was from Eleanor Price, the DOJ senior counsel. Subpoenas issued for Thomas and Margaret Croft. They will be arraigned tomorrow. Will you testify? The question burned brighter than the plane's wing lights against the night sky. Below us, the city shrank to a constellation of distant, unaware stars. I typed my response, each letter a commitment I could not retract. Yes, whatever it takes. On the day of the sentencing, the courthouse corridors buzzed with a tension I could taste. The trial had been swift, the evidence damning. The Rivas organization was crippled. Now it was my parents' turn. I saw him standing outside the courtroom, a hard wooden chair pulled against the wall. Pastor Ben. His Bible was clutched in his liver-spotted hands. He spotted me approaching and rose, his kind face creased with a familiar, deep concern. "Vanessa, please," he said, stepping into my path. "Reconsider. Forgiveness is divine." I halted, my coffee cooling in my hand. My throat tightened at his voice, the same one that had guided me through confirmation class at 16. "Pastor, they put 3 lives at risk. The youngest boy, Andres, he still has nightmares. He won't sleep without the lights on." He leaned closer, his breath smelling of the butterscotch candies he always kept in his pocket. "They didn't know, Vanessa. Margaret told me herself. They truly thought the house was empty." "They never called to ask," I said, the words tasting bitter. "They saw an opportunity. They saw a down payment for Rebecca's perfect day, and they took it. The rest didn't matter." "Blood is thicker than water, Vanessa," he pleaded, his hand brushing my sleeve. "So is responsibility, Pastor." I stepped away, moving toward the courtroom doors. "And some things can't be washed clean." Inside, the courtroom hushed as I entered. Polished wood gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. I spotted Rebecca in the second row, her mascara already smudged, her face a mask of pure hatred. She hadn't spoken to me since the barbecue 3 months ago. My father, Thomas, sat at the defense table, his shoulders slumped inside his best suit, the one he wore to my Marshal Academy graduation, the one he now wore to his own sentencing. My mother sat beside him, back ramrod straight, her hands clasped primly on the table. She'd lost weight. The pink cardigan she once filled out now hung from her frame. They both looked up as I entered. I saw a flash of hope in my mother's eyes. My father straightened slightly, his face softening. They thought I was here to plead for leniency. They thought I was here to save them. They were wrong. "Deputy Marshal Croft," Judge Harriet Monroe called, looking over her glasses. At 72, she was a legend, 30 years on the bench, and unflinching when it came to obstruction of justice. "The prosecution indicates you wish to speak." "Yes, Your Honor," I said, rising and smoothing my charcoal skirt. I approached the witness stand, the Bible cool beneath my palm as I swore to tell the truth. The oak railing felt solid, something to anchor me as my parents' defense lawyer approached, his smile slick and confident. "Deputy Marshal Croft," he began, "you've had time to reflect on this unfortunate family situation. Would you like to speak in mitigation for your parents? To tell the court about their character?" The courtroom waited. Every eye was on me. Rebecca leaned forward, her eyes narrowed. "I would not," I said. The words fell like stones into the silence. My mother's face collapsed. A small, wounded sound escaped her. My father's jaw clenched, the muscle twitching the way it always did when I disappointed him. The lawyer recovered quickly. Perhaps you could explain to the court, then, that there was no criminal intent, that this was merely a misunderstanding. Objection, Eleanor Price said, rising, leading the witness. Sustained, Judge Monroe said. I didn't wait for the next question. With the court's permission, I said, my voice clear and steady, I'd like to submit evidence the prosecution may have overlooked during the primary trial. Judge Monroe nodded. Proceed, Deputy. Hawes, sitting in the front row, handed me a folder. Your Honor, this is a timeline, I said, handing the first document to the bailiff. It shows cartel surveillance of the Brookhaven property beginning 12 hours after. The sale closed. The license plates match vehicles connected directly to Valentin Rivas, Jr. My mother whimpered. This, I continued, is the audio recording from the Lexington Rotary Club luncheon where my mother, Margaret Croft, first mentioned the empty house to Miranda Bishop, the woman who connected her with the cartel's realtor. My father's hands were trembling. This, I said, my voice hardening, is the military power of attorney my parents used to execute the sale. I placed it in front of the judge. I'd like to draw the court's attention to page 4. It clearly states the document's power is limited to emergencies during my active deployment. And right here, I pointed, are my father's initials, acknowledging he read and understood those restrictions. Rebecca stifled a sob. And finally, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake inside me. These are photographs of Andres Escobar, age 10, during his emergency relocation. I handed the glossy 8x10s to the bailiff. The first showed a small boy, his eyes wide with terror, clutching a stuffed dinosaur as Marshal Russo hustled him through a rear exit. The second showed him huddled in the transport van, his small hands pressed over his ears. The psychologist's report, I concluded, notes he now suffers from severe PTSD and experiences panic attacks when hearing Spanish spoken outside his immediate family. Your Honor, the defense lawyer blustered, jumping to his feet. This is prejudicial. It's meant to inflame the court. These are consequences, Counselor, I replied, my voice ringing out in the silent room. Actions have them. You may step down, Deputy Marshal, Judge Monroe said, her eyes lingering on the photographs of Andres. I returned to my seat beside Hawes, my legs trembling. I did not look at my parents. I couldn't. The sentencing proceeded with terrible, swift efficiency. First, the cartel. Valentin Rivas, Sr. Life imprisonment without parole, based on Catalina's testimony. Valentin Rivas, Jr., 22 years for witness tampering, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The kingpin and his heir taken down. Then, my parents. Thomas Croft, Judge Monroe intoned, looking directly at my father. Your actions, driven by greed and a willful disregard for your own daughter's warnings, directly compromised a federal investigation and endangered 3 lives. I sentence you to 4.5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. My father's shoulders sagged. Margaret Croft, the judge continued, your carelessness, your willingness to gossip about sensitive information for financial gain, and your complicity in this act. I sentence you to 3 years in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. My mother's sob echoed against the high ceiling. The court, Judge Monroe finished, also orders the full forfeiture of all proceeds from the illegal sale, including all funds seized from the accounts of Rebecca Croft and any wedding deposits or purchases made with said funds. Rebecca bolted from the courtroom, the door swinging shut in her wake. After, in the marble corridor, my extended family formed a gauntlet of accusing eyes. My father's older brother, Uncle Dennis, stepped forward. He wore his Korean War veteran's cap, his face set in a perpetual scowl. You could have helped them, he growled, his voice thick with anger. You could have asked for mercy. Instead, you buried them. I met his gaze. This was the man who had taught me how to fish, how to skip stones, how to be tough. They buried themselves, Uncle Dennis, I said. They buried themselves the moment they signed that paper. It's just a house, for Christ's sake. It was 3 lives, I shot back. A mother and 2 children who trusted us to keep them safe. What about them? What about their family? And what about your mother? Your father? His voice cracked. What about family loyalty, Vanessa? The question hung between us. Behind him, my cousins and aunts watched, waiting. Some principles run deeper than blood, I said finally. Some lines can't be uncrossed. If that makes me cold, then so be it. I walked away, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Outside, reporters clustered on the courthouse steps. Camera flashes exploded as the door opened. Microphones were thrust in my face. Deputy Marshal Croft, do you regret testifying against your parents? Will you visit them in prison? Was it worth it? I paused at the top of the steps, considering the last question. Wind caught my hair, bringing the scent of cherry blossoms from the nearby park. Spring in D.C., a time of renewal. Justice isn't about regret, I told them, my voice carrying over the shouts. It's about drawing lines between right and wrong, and it's about standing on the right side of that line, no matter what it costs. Behind me, Marshal Russo appeared, a silent, imposing sentinel in his suit. We descended the steps together, moving through the sea of cameras toward the waiting government SUV, leaving the questions and the judgment behind. Morning light streamed through the windows of my Arlington apartment. 4 years since the trial, 2 years since my parents had been released on parole. The coffee maker gurgled in my kitchen as I buttoned my blazer, my fingertips grazing the newly pinned badge on my belt. Deputy Chief. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text message. It was from Catalina Escobar. It was a photo. Her oldest son, Mateo, stood grinning in a suit, holding an award. He was flanked by his mother and a now taller Andres, all of them beaming. The message read, he won the state debate championship. He wants to study at Georgetown Law. He said he wants to become a prosecutor, like Ms. Price. You made this possible, Veronica. Thank you. I studied their faces, alive, thriving, and safe. I tucked the phone into my pocket. On my desk sat a single-framed photograph, my old military unit in Kuwait, arms linked, the desert sun harsh against our squinting eyes. The day I signed that power of attorney, the document that had almost gotten 3 people killed. The drive to Alderson Federal Prison had taken 3 hours, back when I used to make it. The security procedures took another 40 minutes. I remembered the last time I'd gone, a year ago. Margaret, my mother, sat across from me at a scratched metal table, the orange jumpsuit hanging loose on her frame. Her hair had gone completely gray. You look well, she had said, her hands folded precisely, just as they had been at countless dinner tables throughout my childhood. The promotion suits you. I'd said nothing. I just slid the envelope across the table. Another one? She'd asked, touching it like it might burn her. It was a letter from Andres with a drawing of his new house. I've written you 6 times now, Vanessa. You never write back. Do you even read my letters? Every word, I'd said. Her throat worked as she swallowed. When will you forgive us, Vanessa? When will this be over? The question hung in the air, thick with 2 years of stale prison air and regret. I don't know, I answered, my voice flat. When I can look at you without seeing the faces of those you almost got killed, when I can forget what you were willing to trade for a ballroom. We didn't know, she'd insisted, the same tired excuse. You didn't want to know, I'd corrected her. You didn't ask. Rebecca's wedding mattered more. I'd stood up and walked out. I hadn't been back. Back at headquarters, I led the monthly review of active witness cases. My team, Russo, now my lead tactical advisor, and a half-dozen others, presented security assessments, threat analyses, and housing proposals. They were good people. Committed. Not a single witness had been lost under our protection since I took over the D.C. division. Deputy Chief? Russo lingered after the meeting. New class starts training at FLETC next week. You still want to take point on the ethics module? I do, I said, gathering my files. Schedule it for Thursday morning. The training room was filled with fresh faces, crisp uniforms, eager eyes. I stood before them, their attention absolute. You will spend your careers protecting witnesses from professional killers, organized crime, and terrorist cells, I told them. You'll be trained to spot a tail, secure a perimeter, and win a gunfight, but that's the easy part. Confusion flickered across their expressions. Sometimes, I continued, the hardest part of this job isn't protecting your witnesses from strangers. It's protecting them from the people we love. From your roommate who mentions your odd hours to a friend, from your spouse who resents the secrets, from your parents who think they know what's best for your property. Their faces sobered with understanding. Later that evening, Hawes, now the director, found me at the window overlooking the D.C. skyline. The monuments were lit against the deepening purple of the evening sky. "Saw you signed off on the new relocation protocols," he said, joining me. "Good work." "Thank you, sir." We stood in silence for a moment. "They're out," he said quietly. "Your parents. Their parole ended last month. Have you thought about reconciling?" I watched a plane, its lights blinking, make its final approach toward Reagan National. I thought of my mother's letters, still unread in a drawer. I thought of Rebecca, who now lived in Pittsburgh, married to that same lawyer's cousin, and who had blocked my number 4 years ago. "They valued $1.25 million more than 3 lives, sir," I said finally. "They valued a party more than a promise." I turned from the window. If that makes me cold for walking away, so be it. Some duties just run deeper than blood. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.